What's up, everybody? Today we're talking Illustrator, gradient tool, type on a path, clipping mask, and much more. So pull out that color wheel and let's get into it.
Okay, so let's get started. We are working on this infographic project today in Illustrator. As you may or may not know, an infographic is simply a graphic that just gives us some information. So this infographic is about the basic elements of design. We're going to have color, line, shape, and texture in our infographic, and the graphic shows what color is, what lines are, how shape is used, and texture is used in design. All right, so this is what our final project is going to look like. And we're going to go ahead and get started here in Adobe Illustrator. All right, so let's get started by creating a new project. So you click on this create new icon. We're going to use a print template, the letter size one. You don't need to change any of the settings here. We're just going to go ahead and click create. And that's going to open up our blank artboard. Now, before we begin, I want to make sure that all of us are on the same workspace. So we're going to go up to Window up at the top, change our workspace to Essentials Classic. That's the one that I want to use for this project. It makes it a little easier for me to show you the properties over here on the right-hand side as we go through and edit the different elements of our design. I also want to go to the window top menu here and change or go to workspace again and reset the essential classics. So that means if anything changed, if I added any new panels here, changed any settings, it's reset. So it's back at the beginning. All of us should be on the same page then. All right, really easy way to start our project. We're going to use the rectangle tool to create a rectangle that fits the whole shape of our artboard. Now, I can't see the very bottom of my artboard here. It goes off the bottom of my page just a little bit. So I'm going to go up to view up at the top here, and we're going to do fit artboard in window. That way I can see the top, the bottom, I can see the whole thing. Like I said, we're going to use the rectangle tool, which is the fifth tool down on our toolbar. And we're simply going to click and drag and make a rectangle that's the size of the entire artboard, just like that. Now, right now we have it defaulted so that the fill color is white and the stroke color is black for our rectangle, but we're going to change that up a little bit. First, I'm going to take the stroke color off of my rectangle, and then for the fill, I'm going to use the gradient tool. So to use the gradient tool, we're simply going to click on the gradient tool and click inside of that rectangle that we had selected. It automatically puts this gradient line here. We got a few things we got to do before we start editing this gradient. The first thing that we need to do is go to this fill setting in our appearance on our properties panel over on the right hand side, and we're going to open up the gradient options. You could also have just clicked on this gradient panel right here. Both of those get you to the same place. Another thing I need to do is to get our color palette open. So these are the colors that I'm going to be using throughout this whole project. So when I click on that fill button and down at the bottom left hand corner we have a icon that says swatch libraries menu. And I'm going to go to color properties and bright colors because I want to use all bright colors for my project today. That bright color swatches, if you make it a little bit longer here, you can see all these different bright colors. I'm going to go ahead and dock it in my panel over here or in my menu over here so that I have access to those bright colors whenever I need them. So I have my gradient panel and my bright color panel. Both of those I'm going to be needing today. You actually need to have both of these open for the gradient that we're about to edit. So before I dock it, I'm going to go ahead and actually pull it back out so that I can have both of them open at the same time. And then when I'm done, I'm going to dock it over there so I can get back to it really easily. Okay, so with our gradient panel open, we already have our gradient selected over here inside of our rectangle. We're going to edit this so that it looks like our example that we want to go from like this purple to blue, and then have like some white area in the middle. And then the bottom is like a yellow, orange, pinky type of situation down there. First thing I'm going to do is change the gradient to go up and down instead of left to right. So this angle in our gradient, I'm going to change it to -90 so that it's going up and down. You could have done 90 as well. You can see it just rotates it so that the black is on top or the white is on top. I'm just going to do -90. And then I'm going to take this white, I'm going to move it to the center. So like I said, I want the center part to be mostly white background so you can see what's going on in our infographic. So I just move the center to be white right there on our gradient. And that's the color slider, the color stop right there. I just clicked and dragged it to move it to the center. Then I'm going to go ahead and get the right colors down here in my bright colors panel. and drag them up to my gradient where I want them. We're going to start with the purple. So I'm going to grab this purple right here and just click and drag it to the top of my gradient. Then I'm going to go to a teal type color right here, click and drag it right after the purple. And then I'm going to keep the white in the middle. After the white, I'm going to do a yellow. So I'm going to grab one of these yellows. And then I'm going to do a pink at the very end here. All right, so it looks something like this. Now I want it to be a lot more white in the middle because I want it to be like a little bit of color up here up at the top. I'll show you our example again. So we want a little bit of color up at the top, a little bit of color at the bottom, but the majority of this inside area, I want it to be white. So the way that you do that is with that gradient panel still open, you're going to take these little diamonds and you can, oops, sorry. You're going to click once on the diamond to select it. I had that one selected, that's why it popped over there. So click once on the diamond to select it, and then you can click and drag it, and it will make the area of that white more, it goes more to towards the teal. And we're going to do the same thing with this diamond up here. So I clicked on it once to select it, and then move it down. And you can always play around a little bit with these, move it a little bit closer to the edge. I want the bottom area to have a little bit more white, maybe a little bit more pink. And then move this down a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. If yours is not exactly like mine, that's not a big deal. It looks close, then you're good to go. The main thing is you want a lot of white area here so that you have a clear background and it won't distract from the stuff that we're going to put on top of our background. Okay, so we've got our background done. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, dock this over here because we're going to use those colors later. And I can hide my gradient panel. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our text tool to add our title for our infographic. Our title is a glossary, so we're doing the basic elements of design glossary. So I'm just going to click and drag a little text box right here at the top and type the word glossary in all caps. I'm going to highlight my text. So I'm doing Command A on my keyboard. If you're on a PC, it's Control A to highlight everything, or you can simply click and drag your cursor to highlight all of the text. Once the text is highlighted, we're going to change the character to impact. That's the font that we want to use here. And we're going to change the size of this to 52 points. So you can kind of get close to it right there by clicking on that down drop down menu. But then if you want to type in the number 52, or you just use your key, your up arrow on your keyboard to go up to 52. So I have it as 52 points. You can always edit the character up here at the top menu as well. I just got used to using my properties panel on the right hand side, so that's what I'm going to use for the majority of my property editing. So with glossary highlighted, we have it as impact font and size 52. I want to do one more thing real quick with my selection tool. This little line down here, if you double click the little rectangle at the bottom, it's going to automatically resize my text box so that it is bringing it up to where the bottom of the text is. It does leave a little bit of space if there's like a descender in the text, but that's where I want it, just so that it's not, the text box is not a lot bigger than my actual text. This is a really good practice to just get into, is always resizing your text boxes up and down so that when you are adjusting things for proportion and for alignment on your page, they're not bigger than they're supposed to be. All right, so now that I have my text, I'm on my selection tool. I'm going to move it down just a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and start using my rulers and guides to kind of get things laid out the proper way, especially for this top part. So we're going to turn on our rulers to start with. So up at the top menu, view the rulers and show rulers. That's going to put a ruler up here at the top and a ruler on the side here. Right now it's defaulting to points, but I'm going to right click on that ruler and change it to inches. You can see now it's changed it to inches. And remember, our template that we used was a letter size sheet of paper, which is 8.5 inches. You can see 8.5 inches wide by 11 inches vertical. So that's 11 inches there. All right, so that's our rulers. To create a guideline, all you have to do is to click and drag the ruler down, and that's going to make a guideline for you. I'm going to make a guideline at 2 inches up and or so at the horizontal guideline at 2 inches. And I'm just clicking and dragging and moving it to 2 inches. So I'm going to get close to 2 inches. If it's not perfect, it's not a big deal. I'm going to do the same thing as a vertical guideline at 2 inches. Once again, I'm just kind of doing this to help me lay it out. If you wanted to be very precise with your guidelines and make sure they're exactly in the right spot, there's a way to do that as well. So what I want to do that I go up to view, I'm going to go ahead and clear the guides that I have right now. Okay, so to make the guides exactly at 2 inches, if you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and double click on my 2, and Shift key, double click on my 2. There we go. All right, so now we have our guides that are at 2 inches in exactly on both sides. So the reason I put these guides up is because we're going to draw a line down here at the bottom underneath our glossary, and that's really just to help us line it up so that we have plenty of space for everything else below. So we're going to get our line tool, and I'm going to draw a line from that intersection all the way over to the edge, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key to just make sure that it stays perfectly horizontal. You can't really see the line right now because it's on the guide, and it also doesn't have a stroke. So I'm going to change my stroke color to black here. And then I'm also going to change the size of the stroke. So I want it to be 8 points. And now that I have it where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and grab the selection tool and take my word, the glossary, up a little bit so that it's not on the top of the line. We're just going to move it up a little bit and over just about like that. Okay, so if you don't want your guidelines on for the rest of this project so they're clear, that's fine. Guidelines do not print when you're when you're making something in Illustrator. They're just a guide to help you figure out where to lay things out. So if you decide that you don't want to see them, you can always go up to View up at the top, take Guides, and go to Hide Guides. All right, so now we have our title and the line that goes underneath it. We're going to add a little fancy circle right here with the words basic elements of design to add to our glossary title. So we're going to get a ellipse tool and we want to make a perfect circle. So I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key on my keyboard. So when I'm using the ellipse tool and I hold down the Option key or Alt key if you're on a PC, what it does is it makes it so that the circle or ellipse is drawn from the center out. If you're not holding the Option key, it will go from corner to corner, but I'm holding the Option key or the Alt key, and it's drawing from my center. And then if you want to hold the Shift key as well, that's going to keep it proportional so that it's a perfect circle. It's not going to turn into an elongated ellipse or stretch it out anyway. So I'm holding down both the Option key and the Shift key to make my circle, something about like that. I'm going to click and drag it over a little bit so it's overlapping our glossary and our line. I want to change the fill of this to white. And if you don't already have the stroke as none, you're going to keep it on none. We're going to take this white circle in our layers panel over here. And I'm going to expand out this layer. So I'm going to take this ellipse and drag it down so that it's right on top of our background layer rectangle. So all I did was click on it and drag it. So up here at the top, click and drag right above that rectangle layer at the bottom. Now we're going to do a couple of layer styles on this, or some styles on blending options and opacity to change the appearance of the circle. So this is our appearance panel. And you can see it tells us that we don't have a stroke, we have a white fill. What I want to do is I'm going to take the opacity. If you click on that word opacity, it opens up a new menu. And we're going to change our opacity of this ellipse down to 65%. So I'm just going to type in 65 and press enter. Oops. When I press enter, it closed out of it. I want to do one more thing in there. So I'm going to click back on it and change my blending mode to overlay. So you can see it's done this cool little effect. Now, when I move the circle, it has like an overlay effect over it. And so with my black arrow tool, I'm going to click and drag it, get it to be right about there so that it is intersecting with the glossary a little bit. And so we're going to put the words basic elements of design inside of this circle. To do that, we need to make another circle that's going to be the path that we type on. So I've got my ellipse tool again, and I want to find the center of this circle. So you're just going to kind of move your mouse around until you see the word center, and it's going to pop up in this like bright pink magenta color. So I want my new circle that I'm about to draw with my ellipse tool to have the same center as the circle that we already have. So once I see the word center, I'm going to hold down the Option key and the Shift key on my keyboard and draw my second circle. And I'm going to make it just slightly smaller than the one I drew before because that's where I want my text to go for the basic elements of design. All right, once I have that circle created, we're going to use the Type on a Path tool. So if you hover your mouse over the fourth one down, click and hold it, we're going to get the Type on a Path tool. Then you can select the path that you want to type on. Now, make sure you don't get that outside circle. You want to make sure you're clicking on the path of that circle we just created. It automatically uses the same font and size that we had last, which was for our glossary, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and type it. It's going to be super big, but basic elements of design. Like I said, it's super big. I'm going to do Command A or Control A if you're on a PC to highlight the whole text. And we're going to go ahead and change this to a different font. So we're going to do, I think, Trebuchet is what I'm going to use. Yep. And we're going to make the size of it way smaller. So we'll take it down to like 18 here. And I do want to mess with the tracking a little bit here. So this is tracking. It says like BA, and then it has a line going from left to right. I'm going to change that to 120. That's just the space between the letters. You can see that the space kind of spaced out a little bit more when I have it at 120. We're not done yet. We got to go back over here to our black arrow tool, and we got to rotate this around a little bit so that the text is actually in the right spot. I'm using Command plus on my keyboard to zoom in. This can get really hard to place the text exactly where you want it if you don't know where to click and what you're looking for. So with my text that's going on the path, with it selected, you're going to hover your mouse over until your cursor turns into a line with an arrow. So you can see it says like a line with an arrow. And there should be 3 of them throughout the entire circle here. There's 2 right here. I don't know if you guys can see both of them. So there's one that way, and then there's another one right here. So what you're doing with these lines is you're deciding where the text starts, where the text ends, and where the center of the text is. So I'm going to go ahead and click that start one, and you can see that I only click when I see that cursor change to the line with the arrow. With the line of the arrow, I can click and drag and move it so that my text is starting down here. I'm going to do the same thing for the end part. I'm going to move it so we can see the rest of my text. So remember, this is basic elements of design. And now we've got all of our words in there. So that's what we want. All right, so once we have basic elements of design, I actually want it to be, I think, on the inside of the circle instead of the outside of the circle. So with the text already highlighted, so I have it selected, we're going to go up to type on a path, and type on a path options. When you have this box that pops up, go ahead and click that check that preview menu so you can see whatever changes you make in real time. And I'm going to flip it so that it's on the inside. I like that a little bit more, but I don't want it to be upside down. Um, so maybe we'll unchange that. Maybe we'll change it so that we're going to align the path to the descender. No, what about center? Yeah, I like that a lot better. So we align the path to the center of the text. Now I still need to move it out a little bit so we can see the rest of it, but I'm going to keep that the way it is. So align to path center, click OK. And once again, you have to make sure that you can see all of your text. So I'm going to click and drag it over here so we can see basic elements of design all the way around. Now, if you feel like your text is too spread out, you can always highlight it again and change that tracking down a little bit. So I'm going to go maybe down to, let's do 90. And you'll have to play around with yours to see what you like the best. All right, so I have our title up here, Basic Elements of Design Glossary. I'm going to zoom out again. I'm going to use the View Fit Artboard to Window so we can see everything. And now we've got our background and our title area complete. So moving on to the main body of our infographic, we're going to have color, line, shape, and texture be our 3 main items. The color, line, shape, and texture are going to use the same font as glossary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt key on my keyboard. So I have the glossary selected first. I clicked on it to select it with the black arrow selection tool. I'm going to hold down the Alt key on my keyboard until my cursor turns into that duplicate icon. And then I can just click and drag it down. So now I have a copy of that glossary text. Double click inside here. We're going to go ahead and change this to color. Select all the text, and then we're going to make that size 100. Really big. Okay. So once I have the color up there, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this 3 more times to get our line, shape, and texture. I'm holding down the Option key on my keyboard with it selected. Click and drag, makes a copy of it. Click and drag, makes a copy of it. Click and drag and make a copy of it. Now what I do really want to do is I want to get these 2 that are going to be on the right hand side, I'm going to select both of those by holding down the shift key. So I clicked on one, oops, clicked on one, hold down shift key, click on two, so both of them are selected. And then I can go over here to my paragraph panel in my properties and change it so that they are aligned to the right. And we can move them over like so. Before I get started on editing each one of these, I want to make sure that they're distributed evenly across the page so that there's an even amount of space between them. I may change that later depending on the layout of the rest of my elements, but to start with, it just gives me a good baseline of how to lay them out. So I clicked on the first one, hold down the shift key, and I'm selecting all four of these. In my properties panel over here, I have an align option, align panel. If you click on the dot, dot, dot next to it, that's the more options. There's a distribute spacing, and I'm going to do a vertical distribute so that they are evenly distributed across the page vertically. Once again, I might change that up a little bit depending on the spacing of my other stuff, but this is my baseline to kind of help me get started. Okay, so we're going to start with color. Color is our first one. We're going to show what color is with our infographic. So first thing we're going to do is right click and we're going to change this text to outlines. So right click, create outlines. And what that's done is it's changed it so that it is editable text. So you can no longer change the actual letters here. It is shapes. So the C is a shape, the O is a shape, the L is a shape, the O is a shape, and the R is a shape. They're all different shapes and they are grouped together. The way that I know that they are grouped together is because if I'm in my layers panel over here and I scroll down to what is selected, you can see it says group. You may not be able to see that. There you go, it says group. And inside of the group, we have all of our different letters there. All right, so I'm going to keep it grouped. You could ungroup it if you wanted to. You could go right click on group, but I want to actually keep it as a group together. But I need to edit each one of these letters separately. So to go inside of the group to edit it, you're going to double click. And you can see up here, now we are inside of the group. I can select each one of the letters of the word color separately now and edit them individually. So with this C selected, I'm going to choose one of my bright colors, and you can choose this in any order that you want, but I'm going to go with some orange and then a yellow. You can maybe get a pink in here, and then a nice teal color, and then a purple. So that's going to be my different colors. Once you've done selecting each one of those and changing the fill color of each one of the letters of color, you're going to double click anywhere outside the group to get outside of the group. And now we can move on to our next glossary term, which is line. So when I have that selected, I'm going to go double click to edit the word, and we're going to name it line. Get our black arrow tool, have it selected. And this one we're also going to create outlines for. So right click, create outlines. This time we know again that it is a group. If I go down here in my layers panel, it is a group, and each one of the letters of line are a different compound path within group. Once again, to get inside the group, you're going to double click. Now I'm in this isolation mode and I can just see those four things that I'm editing. The first one, we're going to change it so that it has no fill. It has a black stroke. The first letter of the L is going to have a stroke of 3 points. We're showing different kinds of lines. The I, when I select that one, I'm going to change it to have a couple different stroke options. So over here first, I'm going to take off the fill. I'm going to change the stroke to black. And then I'm going to click on the word stroke to add some more options in here. We're going to make it a dashed line that has a 12-point dash and then a 12-point gap. And I also want to change the weight of it to 2. And you can see it over here. We have now a nice dashed line. For our N, we're going to also take off the fill of our N and change the stroke color to black. We're going to do some more stroke options by clicking on the word stroke, and we're going to align the stroke to the inside of the shape and change that weight up to 4. Oops, 4. And we're going to make our corners rounded instead of straight. So there's like the sharp points, and this is our rounded corners. And then on our last one, we're going to once again take off the fill color and make the stroke color black. But for this one, we're going to change the brush that is used. So with it selected up here at the top, we're going to go over here where it says basic brush definition, and we're going to change it to charcoal feather. And then just change the stroke down just a little bit so it's not quite as thick. We're going to change it to 0.5. There we go. Our line is done now. So we can double click outside of the group anywhere in this gray area, and we're outside of that group. Our next glossary term is shape. So I just double clicked and changed the words to shape. We're going to go ahead and change the fill color and the stroke color. I want to use these bright colors, so I'm going to start with my fill color and go over to my bright, and we're going to use maybe bright red here. Let me do it like a pink. I think that might be a little bit better. And then for my stroke, I'm going to use, sorry, for the stroke, you have to select it over here. Then you're going to choose whatever stroke you want, and I'll do a lime green here. All right, we want to make this shape 3D. So to do that, with it selected, you're going to go up to the top menu and go to Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel. And there's lots of different things you can do to change this, but that is perfect. That's exactly what I want. So I'm not going to change any of my settings. I'm just going to click OK. And then our last glossary term, if I double click on that to change the text, is going to be texture. For this one, we want to put a texture inside of the words. So to make a clipping mask, we have to right click on the words and create outlines. So they are now shapes. We're going to ungroup the shape and make it a compound path. So in order to do a clipping mask so that you can see the texture inside of the letters, we have to make this a compound path. So with it selected, we're going to go up to Object, Compound Path, and Make. So over here in our layers panel, you can see we have a compound path. We now need to go ahead and find that texture image that we're going to place inside of our text. So in the top menu, we're going to go to File, Place, find our texture JPEG. And once you have it placed into Illustrator, you're definitely going to want to resize it. Hold down that Shift key so that it doesn't lose proportion. You may have to move it up a few times to get it small enough. And you may even have to zoom out because it is a rather large image. So I'm holding down the Shift key as I scale it down from the corners, and I'm placing it over the word's texture. Once you get it about right there, I'm going to zoom it back in here. Then you're going to make sure that that linked file is underneath the compound path. So I just clicked and dragged it underneath that compound path for texture. Selecting both the compound path and the file that's underneath it. So I held down Shift to select both of those. Then you can right click and make clipping mask. That's going to make it so that what's underneath appears inside of the letters so we can actually see the texture through the letters. I think it'll be really helpful if we have a stroke on our text here. So I'm just going to add maybe, let me get a cool color. So stroke, go to my properties here. We'll do like a purple, just so you can see it a little bit more defined there. Now, like I said, we have these evenly distributed across the page, but now I feel like because this is a 3D shape, I'm going to move it up just a little bit so that we have a little bit more space. We have our 4 glossary terms. Now we need to add our definitions and the arrows that kind of show what each of these mean. So we're going to go ahead and get our text tool, draw a little box over here. We're going to start with our line definition. It is way, way, way too big of a font right now, so we're going to go ahead and change the font size to 14. So over here in our character panel, change it to 14. And now we can type in our definition for line. So a line, let me do it in not all caps. A line refers to how 2 points are connected in space. I'm going to select all of that by doing Command A or Control A if you're on a PC. And we're going to change our tracking back to 0. And we're going to make it center lined. Remember that I like to go ahead and double click on that box at the bottom. So with the black arrow tool, the selection tool, double click so that it resizes our text box to the proper size. And we're going to put that one right beside the line. I'm going to hold down the Option key on my keyboard. If you're on a PC, that's the Alt key, and click and drag to make a copy of that, and so that we can make our color definition. Double click in here to start typing in. Color is the way that light is perceived by the human eye. There we go. Get my selection tool again, select that first one, hold down the Option key to duplicate it. I can get my shape definition. So double click in here, select all with the Command A or Control A. Shape is a 2D or 3D enclosed space defined by one or more lines. And then once again, we're just going to move that around a little bit, hold down our Option or Alt key if you're on a PC, and make a copy. Click and drag, double click, highlight the whole thing, and texture refers to the tactile feel of a surface. All right, if any of these you want to reshape a little bit with that selection tool, you can make it like a little bit thinner, or I'm gonna do that for this one as well, like that. I kind of want them all to be on 3 lines, like the first one. So I'm gonna do that for these. This one's already on 3 lines. Something crazy happened when I moved this in, and I hate when this happens. This is a default setting in Illustrator to make the hyphenation if a word can't fit on a line. That is awful. It's always bad. So I'm going to highlight that text. And in my paragraph properties over here, if you click on the 3 dots, there's a hyphenate button, and you can uncheck that. So now we don't have that hyphen in there. All right, now that we have all of our definitions and they're close to the graphics that we made for each one of them, we need arrows to point to which one goes to which. We're gonna use the pen tool for that. So really easy pen tool here. We're just gonna go from the color. I just clicked once to let go. And this time I'm gonna click and drag to make like a little line that goes from there to there. And then I'm gonna press escape on my keyboard. So I just want those 2 points from there to there. I pressed escape on my keyboard to stop drawing with the pen tool, so that shape is by itself. With the black arrow tool, now it is selected, I'm going to flip-flop these so that it has no fill and a black stroke. So I just clicked on that little arrow, flip-flop, and it has a black stroke now. We're going to make this stroke options, we're going to make it into an arrow. So down here we have arrowhead options. This arrowhead side is for the start point of the path, and this one's for the end point. So we started up here and ended here. So we're going to make the arrowhead at the end point. So I'm just going to click on first arrowhead. Now I want the weight of this line to be a little bit thicker, this weight of this stroke. So we're going to turn that up to, I don't know, maybe 4 here. But now my arrowhead is crazy large. So let's just go ahead and take that down a little bit. We'll take it down maybe to a scale factor of 60. Press enter. That might still be a little too big. So I might change my scale factor down a little bit more. We'll do like 40, 45 sounds good. Okay, so now we have our arrow here. I can move it around and get it right where I want it. We're going to copy and paste this and all 3 of these, or 3 more of these locations, so that each one of these points to their definition. So you can always do Command C or Control C and do the paste Command V or Control V to paste it. But once again, my shortcut is to have it selected. Press down the Option key or the Alt key until you have that double arrow, and then you can just click and drag. And we're going to do it again and again. Now, obviously, these arrows are not in the right spot, so we're going to fix each one of them up. With this first one selected, we're going to use the direct selection tool this time to get the end point to point to the first word of our definition, and the start point to point to our graphic. And you can always play around with these handles to get the arrow exactly where you want it. I think that looks pretty good, so I'm going to leave it there. Then for this one, have it selected, you're going to click on that end point, or the start point, and it's going to start over here maybe at the top of shape. And then my end point is going to end at the beginning of the word shape in our definition. Then I can move my handle around to shape up my arrow. Now, one of the most common problems you're going to have with using this arrow tool is once you select an object, you accidentally start moving it before you click on the actual anchor that you want to edit. So make sure that when you have the white arrow, the direct selection tool, that you select it first, click once to select the object, then click again to select the actual anchor point that you want to edit, and then you can click and drag to move it. So I'm clicking on the anchor point, then click and drag. Click on the anchor point, then click and drag. And then obviously you can move around your handles however you want as well to get it to look how you want. So I think that looks pretty good there. All right, so we've got color, line, shape, texture. We've got our definitions and our arrows. Hopefully yours turned out something like mine. If it's not exactly like mine, if your arrows are a little bit different, that's fine. We just want the general idea.